The sound of boots on wooden planks echoed through the dawn-lit streets of White River, South Dakota. And Catherine Jane knew those footsteps belonged to the man who would seal her fate before noon. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass of her bedroom window, watching shadows move in the pre-dawn darkness of this May morning in 1882, her breath fogging the pain as her heart hammered against her ribs. In 6 hours, she would become Mrs. Malcolm Hutchins, bound by a promise her dying father had made to settle a gambling debt, and the thought made her stomach turn with a nausea that had nothing to do with wedding nerves and everything to do with the bruises she had seen on Malcolm's last wife before the woman died under mysterious circumstances. Catherine was 22 years old, dark-haired and green-eyed, with a spirit that had not yet been broken despite the circumstances that had led her to this moment. Her father had been a good man once, before the whiskey and cards had taken hold of him, and she had forgiven him even as he lay dying in their small house 6 months ago, whispering apologies and explanations about the debt, about Malcolm's agreement to forgive everything if Catherine would marry him. Her mother had died when she was 12, and she had no siblings, no other family to turn to. The town knew what Malcolm was, but no one spoke against him because he owned half the businesses in White River and had the sheriff in his pocket. She turned from the window and looked at the cream-colored dress hanging on the back of her door, the one Malcolm had insisted she wear for the ceremony. It was beautiful in a cold way, all lace and satin, expensive and suffocating. Catherine had not chosen it, had not chosen any of this, and the helplessness of her situation pressed down on her shoulders like a physical weight. A soft knock at her door made her jump. "Catherine!" The voice belonged to Mrs. Brennan, the widow who owned the boarding house where Catherine had been living since her father's death. "There's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent." Catherine opened the door, confusion creasing her brow. "At this hour? Who is it, Mrs.?" Brennan's weathered face held an expression Catherine could not quite read. "A cowboy just rode in. Says his name is Harrison Pierce. He's down in the parlor and he looks like he's ridden hard to get here." The name meant nothing to Catherine, but something in Mrs. Brennan's tone made her reach for her shawl. She followed the older woman down the narrow stairs, her mind racing through possibilities. Perhaps Malcolm had sent someone with a message, or perhaps this was some mistake. The man standing in the small parlor was not what she expected. He was tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that needed cutting, wearing dusty trail clothes and a worn hat he held in his hands. His eyes were a startling shade of blue, and when he looked at her, there was an intensity in his gaze that made her breath catch. He could not have been more than 25, with the bearing of someone who had spent his life under open skies. "Miss Jane." His voice was deep and quiet, with a slight drawl that spoke of time spent further south. "Yes, I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage, Mr. Pierce. I don't believe we've met." He glanced at Mrs. Brennan, who took the hint and retreated to the kitchen, though Catherine suspected the woman would be listening from the other side of the door. Harrison took a step closer, his expression grave. "No, madam, we haven't. But I knew your father, William Jane. Knew him before the troubles came, back when he was working as a surveyor in Wyoming. We were friends, and he did me a kindness once that I never forgot. I've been working a cattle drive up from Texas, and when I got to Cheyenne 2 days ago, I ran into a man who told me about William's death and about the arrangement with Malcolm Hutchins." Catherine felt her cheeks flush. "Then you know my circumstances." "I don't understand why you've come, Mr. Pierce." "Because I owe your father my life, Miss Jane, and because I know what kind of man Malcolm Hutchins is. I rode straight through to get here before the wedding." He turned his hat in his hands, his jaw tight. I can't stand by and let you walk into that kind of situation without offering you another choice." The words hung in the air between them, so unexpected that Catherine could not immediately process them. "Another choice? I don't understand. I'm offering to marry you instead." The words came out in a rush, as though he had been rehearsing them during his hard ride. "I know it sounds crazy, and I know you don't know me from Adam, but hear me out. I've got money saved from the cattle drives, enough to pay off whatever debt your father owed. I've been looking to settle down, buy some land, start a ranch. I can offer you a life that's honest and free from the kind of fear you'd know with Hutchins." Catherine stared at him, her mind reeling. "You would marry a complete stranger to settle a debt to a dead man." "I would marry a woman who deserves better than what she's been given." His blue eyes met hers steadily. "I'm not saying it would be a love match, at least not at first, but I can promise you respect, safety, and a chance at a real life. More than that, I can promise you'll never have to be afraid in your own home." The sincerity in his voice made something in Catherine's chest tighten. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that there was a way out of the trap that had been closing around her for months. But years of hardship had taught her to be cautious. "Malcolm won't let me go easily. The debt is substantial, and beyond that, he's made it known in town that I'm his. He's not a man who takes kindly to being crossed. Let me worry about Malcolm Hutchins." There was steel beneath Harrison's quiet words. "I'm asking you to trust me, Miss Jane, even though you have no reason to. But you have until sunrise to decide. That's when I'm planning to leave White River with or without you. If you come with me, we'll ride to the church in Rapid City where a friend of mine is a minister. We can be married before Hutchins even knows you're gone." Catherine's thoughts spun. Everything in her life had been decided for her, chosen by others, shaped by circumstances beyond her control. But now this stranger was offering her something she had not dared to hope for, a choice. It was mad, impulsive, potentially dangerous. And yet, when she looked into Harrison Pierce's eyes, she saw something she had not seen in Malcolm's cold gaze: decency. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked quietly. "The truth, Mr. Pierce." He was silent for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was low and honest. "Because I know what it's like to feel trapped. And because your father once helped me when I was 19 and stupid and about to get myself killed over a misunderstanding in a saloon in Laramie. He stepped in, talked sense into everyone, probably saved my life. He told me that day that kindness was a debt that should be passed forward, not back. So here I am, trying to pass it forward." Catherine felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them back. She thought of the dress hanging in her room upstairs, of Malcolm's thin smile and dead eyes, of the years stretching ahead filled with fear and submission. Then she thought of open sky and possibility, of a man who had ridden for 2 days straight to offer a stranger a way out. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Sunrise, you said. I'll be waiting at the edge of town, Eastern Road, where it meets the creek. If you don't come, I'll understand, and I'll pay off the debt anyway before I leave. Your father deserved that much." He settled his hat back on his head and moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Miss Jane, I hope you come. I think we might surprise ourselves and make a good team." Then he was gone, his boots echoing down the front steps and into the darkness. Catherine stood frozen in the parlor until Mrs. Brennan emerged from the kitchen, her eyes bright with interest. "That was quite an offer," the older woman said carefully. "It was insane," Catherine replied, but her voice lacked conviction. "Insane can be better than certain misery." Mrs. Brennan moved closer, her expression softening. "I've held my tongue these months, child, because it wasn't my place to speak, but I saw what Malcolm did to his first wife. The whole town saw, even if no one would admit it. You're a good girl, and you deserve a chance at happiness. If that cowboy can give you that chance, maybe you should take it." Catherine looked at the woman who had shown her more kindness than most in this town. "You think I should go with him?" "A complete stranger. I think that sometimes the devil you don't know is better than the devil you do. That man rode hard to get here for you. Malcolm Hutchins wouldn't cross the street for anyone but himself." Mrs. Brennan reached out and squeezed Catherine's hand. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you. But decide for yourself, not because of what anyone else expects." Catherine returned to her room as the sky began to lighten, sitting on her bed and staring at the wedding dress. She thought about Harrison Pierce, trying to read the character of a man she had spoken to for less than 10 minutes. There had been no artifice in his manner, no false charm or pretty words. He had been straightforward about what he was offering and why. It was not love, not romance, but it was honest. She thought about Malcolm, about the way his fingers had gripped her arm too tightly when they last spoke, about the warning in his eyes when she had hesitated over some trivial detail of the wedding. She thought about the whispers that had followed his wife's death, the convenient accident that no one quite believed. As the sun began to paint the horizon in shades of pink and gold, Catherine made her decision. She moved quickly, changing into her simplest travel dress, packing a small bag with her few possessions. She took nothing Malcolm had given her, leaving the wedding dress hanging like a ghost. She wrote a brief note explaining her choice, addressed to Malcolm, and left it on her dresser where it would be found. Mrs. Brennan was waiting at the bottom of the stairs with a package wrapped in cloth. "Some food for your journey," she said, pressing it into Catherine's hands. "And a little money I've been saving. Don't argue, child. You'll need it more than I do." Catherine hugged her fiercely. "Thank you for everything. Be happy. That's thanks enough." Mrs. Brennan walked her to the door and watched as Catherine slipped out into the dawn-lit street. The town was just beginning to wake as Catherine made her way through the quiet streets toward the eastern road. Her heart pounded with each step, half expecting Malcolm to appear from the shadows, to stop her before she reached freedom. But the streets remained empty, and soon she was past the last houses and approaching the creek where Harrison had said he would wait. He was there, standing beside 2 horses, and the relief on his face when he saw her was unmistakable. "You came." "I did." She stopped a few feet away, suddenly shy. "I hope I won't regret it. I'll do everything in my power to make sure you don't." He helped her mount the spare horse, a gentle mare with kind eyes, and secured her bag. Then he swung up onto his own horse, a sturdy bay gelding. "We need to ride hard for the first few hours, put distance between us and White River. Are you up for it?" Catherine had learned to ride as a girl, before the troubles came, and though it had been years, she felt the old confidence return as she settled into the saddle. "I'm ready." They rode out as the sun broke free of the horizon, painting the grasslands in brilliant gold, and Catherine felt something shift in her chest. It might have been fear or excitement or simple relief, but whatever it was, it felt like the beginning of something new. The miles fell away beneath the horses' hooves as they traveled northeast toward Rapid City. Harrison set a steady pace, not so fast as to exhaust the animals, but quick enough to put significant distance between them and White River. They stopped briefly at mid-morning to water the horses at a stream, and Catherine found herself studying her unexpected savior. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, efficient and calm. He checked the horses' hooves, made sure their gear was secure, and handed Catherine a canteen without unnecessary words. There was something reassuring about his competence, his lack of drama or self-importance. "How far to Rapid City?" she asked, taking a drink of cool water. "If we keep this pace, we'll be there by tomorrow evening. We'll stop tonight at a ranch owned by a friend of mine from my trail driving days. John and Martha Whitfield. They're good people, and Martha will be pleased to have another woman to talk to." He glanced at her, gauging her reaction. "You'll have your own room, of course. I meant what I said about respect." Catherine felt some of the tension ease from her shoulders. "I appreciate that. This is all happening so fast, and I suppose I'm still trying to understand why you're really doing this." Harrison was quiet for a moment, gazing out at the rolling prairie. "Your father saved my life, like I said, but there's more to it than just repaying a debt. I've been alone for a long time, Miss Jane, drifting from one job to the next, one town to another. I've been thinking lately that it might be time to put down roots, build something lasting. When I heard about your situation, it seemed like maybe fate was giving us both a chance at something better. You could have had your pick of women if you wanted to settle down," Catherine pointed out. "You didn't have to ride 2 days to marry a stranger." A faint smile crossed his face. "Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I never liked the way courtship works in most places. All that pretense and performance, everyone on their best behavior until after the vows are said, and then you find out who you really married. This way, we're starting honest. No illusions, no false expectations, just two people trying to build a life together." There was a logic to his words that Catherine found oddly appealing. She had seen enough of courtship and marriage in White River to know that romance often faded quickly under the weight of daily life and hard circumstances. Perhaps starting from a foundation of mutual respect and honesty was not such a terrible thing. They rode on, and as the hours passed, Catherine found herself relaxing into the rhythm of travel. The prairie stretched endlessly around them, grass rippling like water in the wind, and the sky was a blue so deep it seemed infinite. She had forgotten how much she loved this land, how the openness of it made her feel like she could breathe. Harrison talked as they rode, telling her about his years working cattle drives, about the ranches and towns he had seen from Texas to Montana. He had an easy way of storytelling, neither embellishing nor understating, just presenting the facts with an occasional dry observation that made her smile. He asked about her life too, and she found herself telling him about her childhood, about her mother's death and her father's decline, about the small joys she had found in teaching herself to read from her mother's books, in tending the small garden behind their house. By late afternoon, Catherine felt as though she had known Harrison longer than a single day. There was something comfortable about his presence, a steadiness that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt in years. When he pointed out the Whitfield ranch in the distance, she felt almost disappointed that their time alone on the trail was ending. The ranch was a sprawling affair with a solid main house, several outbuildings, and extensive corrals. As they rode into the yard, a woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 40, with a round, friendly face and graying blonde hair pulled back in a practical bun. "Harrison Pierce, as I live and breathe," she called out, her face breaking into a wide smile. "John said he saw riders coming, but I didn't dare hope it was you." Harrison dismounted and moved to help Catherine down, his hands steady at her waist. "Martha, it's good to see you. I hope we're not imposing, but I could use your hospitality for the night, and I've brought someone I'd like you to meet." Catherine felt the weight of Martha's curious gaze as the older woman took in the situation. Harrison and a young woman arriving together, the intimacy of his hand still resting lightly on Catherine's waist even after her feet touched the ground. "Martha Whitfield, this is Catherine Jane. We're on our way to Rapid City to be married, and I was hoping you might spare us a room for the night and maybe some of your fine cooking." Martha's eyebrows rose, but her smile never wavered. Well now, that's quite a story and I expect to hear all of it. Of course you're welcome, both of you. Come inside, you must be exhausted. John, she called toward the barn. We have guests. A tall, rangy man emerged from the barn, older than Martha but with the same friendly demeanor. He shook hands with Harrison, welcomed Catherine warmly, and immediately set about helping with the horses while Martha ushered Catherine into the house. The interior was neat and cozy, with curtains at the windows and a large table that spoke of many family meals. Martha directed Catherine to a bedroom upstairs, bringing her fresh water to wash and a clean towel. Now then, Martha said, settling herself on the edge of the bed while Catherine freshened up. Harrison Pierce is one of the best men I know, so I'm not worried about him. But I am curious about how you two met and why you're rushing to get married. Catherine appreciated the directness. She explained the situation, leaving out nothing: her father's debt, Malcolm's reputation, Harrison's unexpected arrival at dawn. Martha listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious as the story unfolded. That takes courage, what you're doing, Martha said when Catherine finished. Running toward the unknown instead of staying with the certain terrible. And Harrison showed his character by riding all that way to help you. But are you scared? Marrying a man you barely know? I'm terrified, Catherine admitted. But I was more terrified of the alternative. At least with Harrison, I have a chance at a decent life. With Malcolm, I had no chance at all. Martha nodded slowly. I've known Harrison for 5 years, since he first worked a drive that brought him past our ranch. He's a good man, honest and hardworking. He's got a temper if pushed far enough, but he's fair and he doesn't raise his hand to those weaker than himself. If he gave you his word about respect and safety, he'll keep it. She reached over and squeezed Catherine's hand. Give it time. I've seen stranger beginnings turn into solid marriages. The fact that you're both starting honest is worth more than you might think. Dinner that evening was a warm, comfortable affair. Martha had outdone herself with roast chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables from her garden. The conversation flowed easily, with John and Martha sharing news of the region and catching up with Harrison on his travels. Catherine found herself laughing at John's stories about the ranch's various mishaps and disasters, and she caught Harrison watching her with an expression she could not quite read. After dinner, Harrison asked to speak with her privately, and they walked out to the porch as the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple. The evening air was cool and sweet with the scent of grass and distant water. I want to make something clear before we go any further, Harrison said, leaning against the porch railing. When we get married tomorrow, I meant what I said about taking things slow. I'm not expecting anything from you except companionship and partnership. If love grows between us, that will be a blessing, but I won't demand it or force it. We'll figure out how to live together as we go. Catherine felt a rush of gratitude for his thoughtfulness. I appreciate that. I won't lie and say I'm not nervous about all of this, but I made the choice to come with you, and I don't regret it. You might eventually, he said quietly. Ranch life is hard work, and I'm not a rich man. I can provide for us, but it won't be fancy. I've never needed fancy, Catherine replied. I need honest and kind. I need to not be afraid. If you can give me that, the rest is just details. Harrison turned to face her fully, his blue eyes serious in the fading light. Then I'll give you my word, Catherine Jane. I'll be honest with you, I'll be kind to you, and I'll make sure you never have reason to be afraid of me. That's my promise, before any vows we say tomorrow. She believed him, and that belief settled something in her chest that had been restless since dawn. Then I'll give you my word too, Harrison Pierce. I'll do my best to be a good partner to you, to pull my weight, to help you build the life you want. I won't make you regret your choice. They stood together on the porch as the stars began to emerge, not touching but connected by the promises they had just made, and Catherine felt the first stirrings of something she had not expected: hope. The next morning, they set out early after a hearty breakfast, with Martha pressing packages of food into their hands and making them promise to visit once they were settled. The ride to Rapid City was easier than the day before, with both Catherine and Harrison more relaxed in each other's company. They talked more as they rode, filling in the details of their lives. Harrison told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, about losing his parents to fever when he was 17, about heading west to make his own way. Catherine shared more about her mother, about the books she loved, about her dreams of someday having a garden of her own again. "I've been looking at land north of Deadwood," Harrison said as they paused to rest the horses. "There's good grazing, water, space to build. It's rough country, and there are still tensions with the Lakota, but I think it's a place where someone willing to work hard could make a real go of it." "Have you been there? To the land you want to buy?" Catherine asked. "Last year, when I was working a drive through the Black Hills. I even talked to the man who owns it, told him I'd be back with money when I was ready. He said he'd hold it for me if I gave him a deposit, which I did." Harrison looked out at the horizon. "I've got enough saved to buy the land, build a small house, and stock it with cattle. It won't be easy at first, but I've worked ranches long enough to know what I'm doing." Catherine tried to imagine it. A small house on open land, cattle grazing, the work of building something from nothing. It was so different from anything she had known, and yet the idea appealed to her. "I don't know much about ranching, but I'm willing to learn. I'll teach you everything you need to know," Harrison said. "And you can teach me to read better. I never got much schooling, and I'd like to improve if you're willing to help." The offer touched her more than she expected. "I'd be happy to." They reached Rapid City as the sun was setting, riding into a town considerably larger than White River, with substantial buildings and busy streets. Harrison led them to a modest hotel, where he secured 2 rooms, again without comment or expectation, just quiet consideration for propriety and her comfort. "The church is just up the street," he said as they stood in the hotel lobby. "My friend Samuel is the minister there. I sent him a telegram from White River before I came to find you, telling him I might be coming with a bride. He'll marry us tomorrow morning if you're still willing." Catherine nodded, her throat suddenly tight. Tomorrow she would be married, bound to this man she had known for less than 3 days. It should have terrified her, and part of her was indeed afraid, but the larger part was simply ready. Ready to move forward, to begin the next chapter, to see what life with Harrison Pierce might hold. That night, lying in her hotel bed, Catherine thought about Malcolm and what he must have done when he discovered her gone. She hoped he would let her go, accept that she had made her choice, but she knew him well enough to suspect he might not. The debt her father owed him was substantial, but it was the insult to his pride that would sting most. Men like Malcolm did not like to be crossed, especially by women they considered their property. She pushed the worry aside. Tomorrow she would be legally married to Harrison, and Malcolm would have no claim on her. They would go to the land Harrison had chosen, build their life far from White River, and she would finally be free. Morning came with a soft rain, gentle and cleansing, and Catherine dressed in the best dress she owned. A simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She arranged her dark hair carefully, pinning it up in a style her mother had taught her years ago, and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked nervous, which was honest, but there was also determination in her eyes. Harrison was waiting in the hotel lobby, dressed in clean clothes, his dark hair neatly combed. He looked almost as nervous as she felt, which was oddly comforting. When he saw her, His eyes widened slightly. "You look beautiful," he said, the words simple but sincere. "Thank you." "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, managing a smile despite the butterflies in her stomach. The church was a small, whitewashed building with a simple bell tower. Inside, it was plain but peaceful, with wooden pews and morning light filtering through modest windows. The minister, Samuel, was a young man with kind eyes and an easy manner who clearly knew Harrison well. "So you finally found someone willing to put up with you," Samuel said with a grin, shaking Harrison's hand. Then he turned to Catherine and his expression grew more serious. "Harrison sent me a telegram explaining some of the situation. I want you to know that if you have any doubts, any concerns at all, you can speak freely. Marriage is a serious commitment, and I won't perform the ceremony if either of you is uncertain." Catherine appreciated his concern. "I'm certain. Harrison offered me a chance at a better life, and I'm choosing to take it. And you, Harrison, you're sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Harrison said, glancing at Catherine with an expression that made her heart skip. "I know it seems sudden, but sometimes that's how life works. You see an opportunity to do something right and you take it." Samuel nodded slowly. "Then let's proceed." The ceremony was simple and brief, just the essential vows spoken in the quiet church with the rain pattering gently on the roof. When Harrison said, "I do," his voice was steady and sure. When Catherine said the same words, she felt the weight of them settling over her, binding her to this man she barely knew, and yet it did not feel like a trap. It felt like a door opening. When Samuel pronounced them married and told Harrison he could kiss his bride, there was a moment of awkward hesitation. Then Harrison leaned in and pressed a brief, gentle kiss to Catherine's lips, nothing demanding or possessive, just a simple acknowledgement of the vows they had made. It was Catherine's first kiss, and while it was not the passionate embrace of romantic stories, it was sweet in its own way. They signed the marriage certificate with Samuel's wife as witness, and then they were walking back out into the rain, legally married, truly bound together for better or worse. "How do you feel?" Harrison asked as they stood under the church's small overhang watching the rain. "Strange," Catherine admitted, "but not in a bad way, just different, like my whole life just shifted direction." "Mine too." He reached out tentatively and took her hand, and she let him, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers. "We should send a telegram to Malcolm, letting him know officially that you're married and the debt is being settled. I'll arrange for the money to be sent to him today." Catherine nodded, though the thought of Malcolm made her uneasy. "Do you think he'll accept it? He doesn't have much choice." "You're legally married now, and the debt will be paid. There's nothing he can do." Harrison squeezed her hand gently. "Let's go take care of it, and then we can start planning our journey to Deadwood." They spent the day making arrangements. Harrison sent a telegram to Malcolm in White River, brief and businesslike, informing him that Catherine was married and that payment for William Jane's debt would be forthcoming. He arranged for the substantial sum to be transferred to Malcolm's account, taking care of the last tie to Catherine's past. They purchased supplies for the journey north, and Harrison bought Catherine a sturdy riding outfit more suitable for ranch life than the dresses she owned. That evening, they shared their first meal as husband and wife in the hotel's small dining room. The conversation was easy, comfortable in a way that surprised Catherine. Harrison was not a man who filled silence with empty words, but when he spoke, he was thoughtful and often funny in a dry, understated way. She found herself laughing more than she had in months. "Tomorrow we'll head north," Harrison said over coffee. "It's about a week's journey to Deadwood, maybe a little more. We'll stop at ranches and towns along the way. I know some people who can help us with supplies and information about setting up the ranch." "I'm ready," Catherine said, and she meant it. The fear of the unknown was still there, but it was overshadowed by a growing excitement about the future. That night, for the first time, they shared a room. Harrison had arranged for a suite with 2 beds, and he made no move toward her except to wish her good night with that same gentle formality. Catherine lay in her bed, listening to his steady breathing from across the room, and felt a strange comfort in not being alone. She had spent so many nights in fear of what marriage to Malcolm would bring. This quiet companionship was a gift she had not expected. The journey north over the following days was an education in both the land and her new husband. They traveled through rolling grasslands and pine-covered hills, following trails that wound through some of the most beautiful country Catherine had ever seen. Harrison pointed out landmarks, taught her to read the weather in the clouds, showed her how to spot good grazing land. They camped under the stars on clear nights, and Harrison was careful to give her privacy while also teaching her practical skills. How to build a fire that would last through the night, how to cook over open flames, how to read tracks and signs of animals. Catherine absorbed everything, determined to be useful and competent in this new life. One evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Harrison asked her about her dreams. "What did you hope your life would be like before everything happened with your father?" Catherine considered the question, gazing into the flames. "I used to dream about traveling, seeing places I'd only read about in books. Having a family, maybe, though I wasn't sure I'd ever find someone I'd want to marry. My mother used to tell me stories about her grandmother who came west in a wagon train, and I always loved the idea of adventure and open spaces." She glanced at him. "I suppose I'm getting that now in a way I never expected. What about now? What do you dream about for the future?" "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "I'm still trying to understand the present, but I think I'd like to have a garden, a good one like my mother used to keep, and maybe a library, even if it's just a shelf of books to start, something beautiful that's mine." She paused. "What about you? What do you dream about?" Harrison was quiet for a long moment, his face thoughtful in the firelight. "I dream about building something that lasts. A ranch that's successful enough to support a family, a home that's solid and warm. I dream about not being alone anymore." He looked at her then, his blue eyes intense. "I know this started as an arrangement, Catherine, but I hope that over time it can become something more. I hope we can build that life together, not just side by side, but as real partners." Something in his words and the way he said them made Catherine's heart beat faster. "I hope that too," she said softly, and meant it more than she had expected. As they drew closer to Deadwood, they began to see more signs of civilization. Mining camps, small settlements, other travelers on the roads. The Black Hills rose around them, dark with pine forests and mysterious in their beauty. Harrison's excitement became more evident as they approached the land he wanted to buy. "Just another day's ride," he said one morning as they broke camp. "The land is north of Deadwood proper, in a valley with a creek running through it. Perfect for cattle, with good grass and shelter from the worst weather." They reached Deadwood itself on a bright afternoon, and Catherine was overwhelmed by the bustling, rough-edged mining town. It was larger and wilder than any place she had been, full of miners and gamblers and all manner of people seeking fortune. Harrison guided them through carefully, clearly familiar with the town's layout. They stopped at the land office, where Harrison spoke with a weathered man named Thompson who remembered him from the year before. "Held that property for you like I promised," Thompson said, shuffling through papers. 200 acres along Whitewood Creek, just like we discussed. "You've got the money." Harrison laid out the payment, counted carefully, and Catherine watched as official documents were signed and witnessed. Just like that, they owned land. 200 acres of Dakota territory, a place to build their future. Thompson gave them directions and wished them luck, and they rode out of Deadwood toward their new home. The land, when they reached it an hour later, took Catherine's breath away. The valley was green and lush, with the creek sparkling in the afternoon sun, pine trees climbing the surrounding hills, and more space than she had ever imagined owning. It was raw and wild and absolutely beautiful. Harrison dismounted and helped Catherine down, and they stood together looking out over their property. "What do you think?" he asked, his voice betraying his nervousness. "It's perfect," Catherine said, and she meant it. She could see it already in her mind. A house nestled near the creek, a barn and corrals, cattle grazing, a garden plot near the house. "It's absolutely perfect." The relief and joy on Harrison's face made him look younger, and for the first time he pulled her into a spontaneous hug. Catherine stiffened for just a moment, then relaxed into it, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. When he released her, both of them were smiling. "Let's make camp," Harrison said. "Tomorrow we start building our home." The work was hard and constant, but Catherine found she did not mind it. Harrison hired a few men from Deadwood to help with the heavy construction, and together they built a sturdy cabin near the creek. 3 rooms with a good fireplace, solid walls, and a porch that looked out over the valley. Catherine worked alongside them, learning to think mud for the chinking, helping to fit window frames, suggesting small improvements that made the house more livable. At night, exhausted from the day's labor, they would sit by the fire and talk about their plans. Harrison ordered supplies for fencing, began negotiating for cattle, made arrangements with neighbors for mutual support and assistance. Catherine planned her garden, sketched the layout of flower beds she wanted to plant come spring, thought about curtains and furnishings for their home. As the weeks passed and summer deepened into autumn, something shifted between them. It was gradual, almost imperceptible at first. The way Harrison's hand would linger on her shoulder when he passed by, the way Catherine found herself watching for him when he was working away from the house, the comfortable silences that fell between them that felt more companionable than awkward. One evening in late September, as the first cool hint of autumn touched the air, they sat on their finished porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The house was complete, the barn was taking shape, and the first small herd of cattle had arrived that afternoon. "We did it," Harrison said quietly. "We built something real." Catherine looked at him, at the satisfaction on his face, at the way the fading light caught in his dark hair and made his blue eyes even more striking. Over the past months, she had come to know this man, his steady reliability, his dry humor, his kindness, his strength. She had seen him work until his hands bled to build their home. She had watched him gentle a skittish horse with patience and care. She had listened to him read haltingly from books in the evenings, determined to improve himself. And somewhere along the way, without quite noticing when it happened, she had fallen in love with him. The realization was both startling and natural, as though it had been inevitable from the moment he offered her a choice at sunrise back in White River. She loved him, this quiet cowboy who had ridden 2 days to save a stranger, who had kept every promise he made, who had given her space and time and respect even when it must have been difficult. "Harrison," she said softly, and something in her voice made him turn to look at her. "I need to tell you something." He waited, his expression open and attentive. "When we got married, I was grateful and hopeful, but I didn't expect this. I didn't expect to feel this way." She took a breath, gathering her courage. "I've fallen in love with you. I don't know exactly when it happened, But somewhere between White River and here, between building this house and planning this life, you stopped being the stranger who saved me and became the man I want to spend the rest of my life with. Not because of obligation or debt, but because I choose you." Harrison's expression transformed, a slow smile spreading across his face that made him almost handsome. "Catherine," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I've been in love with you since about the third day we were on the trail together. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to pressure you, didn't want you to feel obligated to return feelings you didn't have. But God, I've wanted to tell you every day since." He reached out and cupped her face in his calloused hands, his touch gentle despite his strength. "You're the bravest, smartest, most determined woman I've ever met. You've worked yourself to exhaustion building this ranch. You've never complained, never asked for more than I could give. You've made this place a home just by being in it. I love you, Catherine Pierce, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." Then he kissed her, and this time it was nothing like the brief, formal kiss in the church. This kiss was full of months of restrained longing, of feelings held back out of respect and caution, and Catherine kissed him back with all the love and passion she had been afraid to acknowledge even to herself. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, the sun had set and the first stars were emerging. "I think," Harrison said, his forehead resting against hers, "that maybe we should consider sharing a bedroom from now on, if you're amenable." Catherine laughed, joy bubbling up inside her. "I'm very amenable." They moved her things that night, and for the first time since their wedding, they truly became husband and wife in every sense. Harrison was gentle and patient, mindful of her inexperience, and Catherine discovered that physical intimacy with someone you loved was nothing like the frightening, painful thing she had feared with Malcolm. It was tender and joyful, a new way of expressing feelings that had grown too large for words alone. Afterward, lying in Harrison's arms in the darkness, Catherine thought about how strange life was. 6 months ago, she had been trapped and terrified, facing a future of certain misery. Now she was here, in a home she had helped build, married to a man she loved who loved her in return, with a future full of possibility stretching ahead. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Harrison's voice was drowsy content. "For giving me a choice at sunrise. For keeping your promises. For loving me." His arms tightened around her. "Thank you for trusting me enough to take the chance, for choosing me, for building this life with me." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other and in the warm glow of love acknowledged and returned, and Catherine's last thought before sleep claimed her was that she was, for the first time in years, completely happy. The first winter on their ranch was challenging but not overwhelming. Harrison had prepared well, with sufficient hay stored for the cattle and ample supplies for the household. Catherine discovered she had a talent for making their small home cozy despite the bitter cold outside, and the long winter evenings gave them time to simply be together, talking and reading and learning each other in ways that went deeper than the passionate nights they shared. Harrison proved to be a dedicated student, and under Catherine's patient teaching, his reading improved dramatically. By spring, he could make his way through the newspapers that came from Deadwood, and even attempted some of the more complex books Catherine treasured. In turn, he taught her everything about ranching: how to doctor sick cattle, how to mend fences, how to predict weather by reading the sky and the behavior of animals. They also learned each other's histories more completely. Harrison told her about his years of loneliness after his parents died, about close calls with stampedes and outlaws, about the friends he had made and lost along the trails. Catherine shared her own grief about her father's decline, her complex feelings about his choices, her dreams that had seemed impossible until Harrison arrived. One snowy evening in January, as they sat before the fire, Catherine broached a subject that had been on her mind. "Do you ever think about children?" Harrison looked up from the book he was reading, his expression thoughtful. "I do. I'd like to have children with you if you want them. A family to fill this house and work this land after we're gone." "I want that too," Catherine said softly. "I want children who grow up free and loved, who never have to be afraid in their own home." He set aside his book and reached for her hand. "Any child of ours will be loved beyond measure and safe always. That's a promise." Spring came slowly to the Black Hills, but when it finally arrived, it was glorious. The valley burst into life, with wildflowers carpeting the meadows and the creek running high with snowmelt. Catherine planted her garden with seeds she had carefully saved, and new ones purchased from Deadwood, and she tended it with the same dedication her mother had shown. Harrison and his hired men worked to expand their herd, and the ranch began to truly prosper. By summer, Catherine suspected she was pregnant, and a trip to the doctor in Deadwood confirmed it. She told Harrison that evening as they stood looking out over their land, watching their cattle graze in the fading light. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests, his face alight with joy. "We're having a baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "We're going to be parents." That night, lying in bed with Harrison's hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach, Catherine felt a contentment so profound it brought tears to her eyes. The baby would be born in late winter, a new life beginning in a place built on hope and love and second chances. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Catherine continued to work on the ranch well into autumn, only slowing down when Harrison began to worry about her overexerting herself. They prepared a nursery in the third room of the house, with Harrison building a beautiful cradle from pine he had carefully selected and finished himself. Catherine sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart full of anticipation. It was in late October, more than a year after they had first met, that a rider appeared at their ranch bearing news that made Catherine's blood run cold. Malcolm Hutchins was in Deadwood, and he had been asking questions about Harrison and Catherine Pierce. Harrison's face went hard when he heard the news. "How long has he been there?" "3 days, according to the man who told me," the rider, a neighboring rancher named Bill Carson, replied. "He's been in the saloons, talking about a woman who was promised to him, about debts unpaid and honor violated. Some folks are saying he's looking for a fight." Catherine felt fear not in her stomach, the old terror of Malcolm surfacing despite the months and miles between them. "Why would he come now? You paid the debt. We did everything properly." "Men like Malcolm don't care about proper when their pride is hurt," Harrison said grimly. He turned to Bill. "Is he alone?" "Seems to be, though he's been trying to hire men to ride with him. So far no one's been willing, but that could change if he offers enough money." After Bill left, Harrison and Catherine talked long into the night about what to do. Harrison wanted to ride into Deadwood and confront Malcolm directly, end the threat once and for all. Catherine was terrified of that option, afraid of what might happen if the two men faced each other. "You could be killed," she said, her voice shaking. "He's dangerous, Harrison. He's killed before, even if it was never proven." "I won't let him threaten you or our baby," Harrison said firmly. "This needs to end, Catherine. As long as he's out there nursing his grievance, we'll never be truly safe." They compromised on a plan. Harrison would ride into Deadwood, but he would take Bill and 2 other neighboring ranchers with him. He would seek out Malcolm in a public place, with witnesses, and make it clear that any attempt to harm Catherine or their family would be met with legal consequences, and the collective protection of their neighbors. It was not a perfect solution, but it was better than an outright confrontation. Catherine insisted on going with him despite her pregnancy, unwilling to be left behind in fear. They rode into Deadwood on a cold November morning, accompanied by Bill and the others, and found Malcolm in the largest saloon, already drinking though it was barely noon. He looked thinner than Catherine remembered, harder, with a mean edge to his features that had deepened in the year since she had seen him. When he saw her walk in with Harrison, his eyes went cold and flat. "Well," he said, his voice carrying through the suddenly quiet saloon. "If it isn't the runaway bride and her cowboy savior." Harrison positioned himself between Malcolm and Catherine, his stance relaxed but ready. "Hutchins, I paid your debt in full with interest. Catherine is my wife, legally married. There's no cause for you to be here. No cause." Malcolm's laugh was bitter. "She was promised to me. Her father gave his word. And I fulfilled that word by paying what was owed," Harrison replied evenly. "You've been compensated. Whatever grievance you're nursing, it's with pride, not with debt." Malcolm's hand drifted toward his gun, and every man in the saloon tensed. Catherine felt her heart hammering, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach where their child grew. But before Malcolm could draw, the sheriff stepped into the saloon, accompanied by 2 deputies. "I heard there might be trouble," Sheriff Donovan said, his voice calm but authoritative. "Mr. Hutchins, I've received several complaints about your behavior in my town. Threatening talk, attempts to hire guns, disturbing the peace. I'm going to have to ask you to leave Deadwood." Malcolm's face flushed with anger. "This is none of your concern, Sheriff. When a man starts making threats against a pregnant woman in my jurisdiction, it becomes my concern," Donovan replied. "Mrs. Pierce is a lawful wife. The debt you claimed was paid in full, and you've got no legal standing here. You can leave peacefully, or I can arrest you for disturbing the peace and conspiracy to commit violence. Your choice." For a long, tense moment, Catherine thought Malcolm would choose violence. His hand remained near his gun, his eyes full of rage as he looked between her and Harrison. Then, slowly, he straightened and stepped away from the bar. "This isn't over," he said quietly, his eyes locked on Catherine. "Yes, it is," Harrison replied, his voice hard as iron. "You come near my wife or my family again, and it won't be the sheriff you're dealing with. It'll be me and every rancher in these hills. We take care of our own, and Catherine is one of us now. You're nothing but a bad memory she left behind." Malcolm left the saloon without another word, but the threat in his eyes remained. Sheriff Donovan watched him go, then turned to Harrison. "I'll make sure he leaves town, but I can't control what he does once he's gone. You folks be careful." "We will be," Harrison assured him. "And thank you, Sheriff." They stayed in Deadwood that day, making sure Malcolm actually left, and Catherine felt no relief until she saw him ride out on the southern road, heading back toward White River. Even then, a lingering unease remained. "You think he'll come back?" she asked Harrison as they rode home. "I don't know," he admitted. "But if he does, we'll be ready. I'm going to talk to the neighbors about keeping watch, making sure we all look out for each other. Men like Malcolm feed on isolated victims. We're not isolated anymore." True to his word, Harrison spent the next weeks building a network of mutual protection with the neighboring ranches. They established a system of signal fires that could be lit if danger threatened, regular check-ins, and agreements to come to each other's aid if needed. It was the frontier way, communities taking care of themselves when the law was too far away to help. As winter closed in and Catherine's pregnancy advanced, the threat of Malcolm faded into the background of daily life. There were no more sightings, no more threats, and eventually, Catherine allowed herself to believe that perhaps he had given up, moved on to nurse his wounded pride elsewhere. The baby came on a snowy February night, after a long labor that left Catherine exhausted but exhilarated. Harrison stayed by her side through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement and love. When the doctor finally placed their son in Catherine's arms, Harrison wept openly, overcome with emotion. "He's perfect," Harrison whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with wonder. "Absolutely perfect." They named him William Harrison Pierce, honoring both Catherine's father and his own given name. Little Will was a healthy, robust baby with dark hair and eyes that would eventually turn the same striking blue as his father's. Catherine fell instantly and irrevocably in love with him, and watching Harrison with their son made her love him even more. Harrison proved to be a devoted father, as patient and gentle with Will as he was with everything else he cared about. He would walk the floor with the baby for hours when he was fussy, would sing old trail songs in his rough voice until Will fell asleep, would change diapers and heat bottles without complaint. Catherine watched them together and felt blessed beyond measure. Spring came again, then summer, and life on the ranch settled into a rhythm. The cattle herd grew, the garden flourished, and Will thrived. They hired additional help for the ranch, including a young couple who became friends as well as employees. The house that had seemed large for just the two of them now felt perfectly sized for their growing family. On a warm evening in July, as they celebrated Will's first birthday with their friends and neighbors, Catherine stood on the porch watching Harrison play with their son in the yard. Will was learning to walk, taking stumbling steps toward his father while Harrison encouraged him with outstretched arms and a laugh full of joy. Bill Carson came to stand beside her, a cup of lemonade in his hand. "You've built something real nice here, Catherine. A good home, a good family. Your mother would be proud." Catherine felt tears sting her eyes at the unexpected comment. "Thank you, Bill. That means a lot. We all knew what Malcolm was," Bill continued quietly. "We all felt bad that you were stuck with that situation. I'm glad Harrison came along when he did. You two are good for each other and good for this community." "We're lucky to have neighbors like you," Catherine replied. "All of you have made us feel welcome, helped us build this place. We couldn't have done it alone." "That's what neighbors do," Bill said simply. "We take care of each other." As the party continued into the evening, with fiddle music and dancing and laughter, Catherine felt a profound gratitude for the life she had been given. It had started with fear and desperation, with a stranger offering a choice at sunrise, but it had grown into something beautiful and real and lasting. That night, after everyone had left and Will was asleep in his cradle, Catherine and Harrison sat on their porch as they had so many times before, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "You ever think about that morning in White River?" Catherine asked. "When you came to Mrs. Brennan's boarding house and offered me a way out?" "All the time," Harrison admitted. "I think about how close I came to not riding to White River at all, to deciding it wasn't my place to interfere. If I had made a different choice that day, where would we both be now?" Catherine shuddered at the thought. "I'd be dead, probably, or wishing I was, and you'd still be drifting alone. Instead, I'm here with you, with our son, with this life we built together." He reached over and took her hand. "I've never believed much in fate, but I have to think there was some kind of design in how we came together. Like we were meant to find each other, to save each other." "I don't know about fate," Catherine said, "but I know about choices. You chose to ride to White River. You chose to offer me an alternative. I chose to trust you, to come with you, to build this life with you, and we've chosen each other every day since. Maybe that's more powerful than fate." Harrison brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I choose you, Catherine Pierce." Today, tomorrow, and every day after. You and Will and whatever other children we might have. You're my family, my home, my heart. And you're mine, Catherine replied, her voice thick with emotion. Always. They sat together as the night deepened, at peace in the life they had created through courage, hard work, and love. The wild land around them was slowly being tamed, but it remained beautiful and free, full of possibility. It was exactly the life Catherine had dreamed of when she was young, before hardship came. And it was more than she had dared to hope for when Harrison Pierce rode into White River at dawn. The years that followed were good ones, full of the joys and challenges of building a successful ranch and raising a growing family. Will was joined by a daughter, Emma Catherine, when he was 3, and then another son, James William, 2 years after that. The house was expanded to accommodate the growing family, with Harrison and hired help adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper dining room. Catherine established a school on their property, teaching not just her own children, but also the children of neighboring ranches and workers. It was something she had always wanted to do, and she found deep satisfaction in sharing her love of learning with the next generation. Harrison supported her completely, even building a small schoolhouse near their main house where she could teach properly. The ranch prospered beyond their initial hopes. Harrison proved to have a keen eye for cattle breeding and land management, and their herd became known throughout the region for quality. They expanded their holdings, purchasing adjacent land as it became available, until the Pierce Ranch was one of the most successful in the Black Hills region. But success did not change who they were or how they treated others. Harrison remained the same quiet, hard-working man he had always been, respected by his workers and neighbors for his fairness and integrity. Catherine continued to open her home to those in need, whether it was a meal for a traveling family or help for a widow struggling to manage alone. They raised their children to understand that prosperity came with responsibility, that those who had much owed much to the community that supported them. Malcolm Hutchins was never seen again in their part of Dakota territory. Years later, they heard through the grapevine that he had died in a saloon brawl in Kansas, shot by a man he had cheated at cards. Catherine felt sadness at the news, not for Malcolm himself, but for the waste of a life consumed by bitterness and cruelty. She was grateful that her own life had taken such a different path. As the children grew, they each developed their own personalities and interests. Will was serious and responsible like his father, already showing an aptitude for ranching even as a young boy. Emma was spirited and bright, with her mother's love of learning and her father's determination. James was the charmer, quick to laugh and make friends, bringing joy wherever he went. Catherine watched them grow with a mother's pride and a survivor's gratitude. Her children would never know the fear she had known, the helplessness of being trapped by circumstances beyond their control. They were growing up free and loved, with parents who adored them and each other, on land that would be their inheritance and their future. One autumn evening, when Will was 12, Emma 9, and James 7, the family gathered on the porch after dinner as was their custom. The children were supposed to be getting ready for bed, but they had begged for one more story, and Catherine had agreed. "Tell us about how you and Papa met," Emma asked, curling up beside her mother. It was a story the children never tired of hearing. Catherine glanced at Harrison, who smiled and nodded. She had told them an edited version before, appropriate for their ages, but now that they were older, she felt they could understand more of the truth. "Your father rode into White River on a May morning in 1882, she began. "I was in a difficult situation, about to marry a man I did not love and who would not have been kind to me. Your father, who I had never met before, offered me a different choice. He offered me a chance at a better life, and I was brave enough to take it. Were you scared? Will asked. Terrified, Catherine admitted. Your father was a stranger, and I was trusting him with my entire future. But I was more scared of staying where I was, and sometimes the brave choice is the one that leads into the unknown. But it worked out, Emma said confidently, because Papa is the best. Harrison laughed, pulling his daughter close. Your mother is the brave one. I just offered the choice. She's the one who had the courage to take it. We're both brave, Catherine corrected, and we're both lucky. Lucky that we found each other, that we built this life together, that we have you three amazing children. Tell the part about the sunrise, James urged. That's my favorite part. Catherine smiled, remembering that dawn so many years ago. The sun was just coming up when I made my decision to go with your father. I walked through the empty streets of White River with my heart pounding, not knowing if I was making the right choice or the biggest mistake of my life. And when I got to where your father was waiting, and I saw the relief on his face, I knew I had chosen correctly. The sunrise was the start of our new life together, Harrison added. Everything good in my life, everything that matters, started that morning when your mother trusted me enough to take a chance. The children eventually went to bed, though not without multiple kisses and hugs, and Catherine and Harrison were left alone in the quiet evening. They sat close together on the porch swing Harrison had built years ago, moving gently back and forth, comfortable in the silence. You ever regret it? Catherine asked, though she thought she knew the answer. Taking on a stranger's troubles, building this life with me instead of someone you chose in a more traditional way. Harrison turned to her, his blue eyes serious and full of love. Catherine, you are the best choice I ever made. This life, this family, this love we have is beyond anything I could have imagined that morning when I rode into White River. I don't regret a single moment, not even the hard times, because they all led us here. Catherine kissed him, a kiss that still held passion after all these years, but also held comfort, familiarity, deep abiding love. I love you, Harrison Pierce. You gave me not just a choice, but a whole life, a real life, full of love and purpose and joy. We gave each other that, Harrison corrected. You chose to trust me, to work beside me, to build this ranch and this family. You're the strongest person I know, Catherine, and I'm grateful every day that you took that chance at sunrise. They sat together as the stars emerged, at peace with their past and confident in their future. The Wild West was slowly changing, becoming more settled and civilized, but here in their valley, they had created something timeless. A family built on love, a home built on trust, a life built on the courage to choose hope over fear. More years passed, and the Pierce children grew into capable, compassionate adults. Will took over more and more of the ranch operations, working alongside his father with a skill and dedication that made Harrison proud. Emma divided her time between helping her mother with the school and managing the household accounts, showing a head for business that surprised and delighted her parents. James charmed everyone he met and developed a talent for horse training that made him invaluable to the ranch. Catherine and Harrison aged gracefully together, their love deepening with each passing year. They became pillars of their community, the couple everyone pointed to as an example of what marriage could be when built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Young people came to them for advice, struggling couples for counsel, and they shared what they had learned. That love was a choice you made every day. That partnership required work and compromise. That communication and honesty were the foundations of everything good. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Harrison surprised Catherine with a beautiful locket containing tiny photographs of their 3 children. They celebrated with a party that brought neighbors from miles around, And as Catherine danced with her husband under lanterns strung in their yard, she thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Thank you," she whispered to Harrison as they swayed to the music. "For the locket," he asked with a smile, "for everything, for giving me a choice when I had none, for keeping every promise you made, for 20 years of love and partnership and building this beautiful life together." Harrison's arms tightened around her. "Thank you for being brave enough to take the chance, for trusting me when you had no reason to, for making me happier than I ever thought possible." As they danced under the stars, surrounded by family and friends, Catherine reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. If her father had not made that desperate bargain, if Harrison had not heard about her situation, if she had not found the courage to leave White River at sunrise, none of this would exist. Her children would never have been born, this ranch would not exist, and she and Harrison would have lived completely different lives. But she had made that choice, and it had changed everything. The years continued to pass, bringing grandchildren and new challenges, and the satisfaction of seeing the legacy they had built continue into the next generation. Will married a kind, capable woman named Sarah who fit perfectly into the family. Emma married a teacher from Deadwood who shared her love of learning. James, true to his charming nature, swept a visiting rancher's daughter off her feet and brought her home as his bride. The house that Harrison had built so many years ago was expanded again and again to accommodate the growing extended family. Grandchildren ran through the rooms where Catherine and Harrison had raised their children, and the sound of laughter and young voices filled spaces that had once held only the two of them. Catherine continued teaching until her early 50s, when younger women took over the school, though she never stopped learning herself. She built the library she had dreamed of, filling an entire room with books that she shared generously with anyone who wanted to borrow them. Harrison remained active on the ranch well into his 60s, though he gradually handed over more responsibility to Will and the younger men. On a summer evening when Catherine was 54 and Harrison 57, they sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. The valley was golden in the setting sun, cattle grazed peacefully, and they could see their grandchildren playing in the yard while their children supervised. "We did well, didn't we?" Harrison said, his hand finding Catherine's as naturally as breathing. "We did," Catherine agreed. "We built something real and lasting. A family, a home, a legacy." "I still remember that morning so clearly," Harrison said. "Walking into Mrs. Brennan's boarding house, seeing you for the first time, not knowing if you would trust me enough to come. I remember being terrified but also feeling like maybe, finally, I had been given a chance at something better," Catherine replied. "And I was right. You gave me everything I dreamed of and so much more." "We gave each other everything," Harrison corrected gently, a familiar refrain between them. "I was lonely and drifting before you. You gave me a reason to settle down, to build something permanent. You made me a better man." Catherine squeezed his hand, feeling the familiar calluses, the strength that remained despite the years. "Do you remember what you said to me that morning? That you were offering me a different choice." "I remember every word of that conversation," Harrison said. "I was so nervous, afraid you would think I was crazy or have ulterior motives." "You were offering me freedom," Catherine said softly. "Not just from Malcolm, but from feeling helpless and trapped. You were offering me agency over my own life. That was the greatest gift anyone could have given me." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set and the stars began to emerge, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together. Inside the house, they could hear their family gathering for dinner, the warm sounds of people who loved each other sharing a meal. "I would do it all again," Harrison said quietly. Every moment, every challenge, every joy. If I could go back to that morning in White River knowing everything that would come after, I would make the same choice without hesitation. So would I, Catherine replied. You offered me a choice at sunrise, and I chose you. Best decision I ever made. As they rose to join their family for dinner, Catherine paused to look out over the valley one more time. The wild west of their youth was fading into memory, replaced by growing towns and increasing civilization. But here, in this valley, they had created something that would last. A family bound by love, a ranch built on hard work and integrity, a legacy of courage and choosing hope over fear. Harrison put his arm around her shoulders as they walked toward the house, and Catherine leaned into his familiar warmth. After more than 30 years together, they moved as one unit, perfectly synchronized, perfectly matched. The family gathering was warm and boisterous, with multiple conversations happening simultaneously and children weaving between the adults. Catherine watched them all with a full heart. Her 3 children, now adults with families of their own, her 7 grandchildren, each unique and precious. Harrison at the head of the table, still commanding quiet respect with his presence. This was what she had chosen that sunrise morning so many years ago. Not just escape from a bad situation, but this: love, family, home, legacy. Harrison had offered her a choice, but what he had really offered her was a future, and she had been brave enough to reach for it. After dinner, as the family lingered around the table talking and laughing, Will raised his glass. "I want to propose a toast," he said, his voice carrying over the conversations. "To my parents, who showed all of us what real love and partnership looks like. You built this ranch, this family, this life from nothing but courage and hard work. You've given us all an example to live up to, and we're grateful for everything you've sacrificed and built for us." To Catherine and Harrison, the family chorused, raising their glasses. Catherine felt tears sting her eyes as she looked around the table at all the faces smiling at her and Harrison. This was success, she thought. Not just the prosperous ranch or the money in the bank, but this: children who grew into good people, grandchildren who were loved and secure, a family bound together by respect and affection. Harrison stood, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Thank you, Will, but the truth is that your mother is the hero of this story. I just offered her a way out. She's the one who had the courage to take it, to work beside me to build all of this, to make our house a home and our family something special. Everything good in my life comes from the moment she chose to trust me. And everything good in mine comes from your offer," Catherine said, standing beside him. "We saved each other that day, Harrison, and we've been saving each other every day since." The family erupted in applause and happy tears, and Catherine felt surrounded by love in a way that made her heart almost too full to bear. She thought of the girl she had been at 22, frightened and trapped, facing a future of certain misery. She wished she could reach back through time and tell that girl that everything would be okay, that help was coming at sunrise, that courage would be rewarded beyond her wildest dreams. As the evening wore on, and the family gradually dispersed to their various homes and rooms, Catherine and Harrison found themselves once again on their porch, alone with the stars and the night sounds of their valley. "You think we'll see 40 years together?" Catherine asked, leaning her head on Harrison's shoulder. "I intend to see 50 if I have anything to say about it," Harrison replied, kissing the top of her head. "I'm not ready to be done with you yet, Mrs. Pierce." "Good," Catherine said, smiling into the darkness. "Because I'm not ready to be done with you either." They sat together until the moon rose high and the night grew cool, reluctant to leave this moment, this perfect evening that seemed to encapsulate all the best parts of the life they had built. Eventually, though, age and tiredness drove them inside, where they climbed into the bed they had shared for more than 3 decades, still finding comfort in each other's presence. As Catherine drifted toward sleep, Harrison's arms secure around her waist, she thought once more about choices and chances and the unpredictable nature of life. She had been promised to a cruel man, trapped by circumstances and debt and her father's poor decisions. But a cowboy had offered her a different choice at sunrise, and she had been brave enough to take it. Everything that came after, all the love and joy and struggle and triumph, had flowed from that one courageous decision to trust a stranger and choose hope over certain despair. It had been the most important choice of her life, and she had never once regretted it. In the darkness, she whispered one more time, "Thank you, Harrison Pierce, for giving me a choice." And Harrison, still awake and holding her close, whispered back, "Thank you, Catherine Pierce, for choosing me." They fell asleep like that, surrounded by the home they had built, secure in the love they had nurtured for more than 30 years, at peace with the past and content with the present. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, and the valley slept in quiet peace, and the Wild West continued its slow transformation into something new, while the love story of Catherine and Harrison Pierce remained constant and true. A testament to courage, trust, and the power of offering someone a choice when they had none. One sunrise morning long ago in White River, South Dakota.